Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Good to have everybody here. We are kicking off the next version of our AKS Roadmap session at our AKS community channel here. So thank you for joining. Probably have 30 minutes or so of things to cover. It's been a while since we've done one of these, so I apologize for the delay. We had the event season, holidays, and so forth, but we're getting back to it now. We have some exciting things that we're doing with this. So let's get right into it. This is, as I said, our AKS Roadmap Community meeting. We plan on doing, and let me jump over and get my slides going here. Sorry about that. Uh, but what is our plan for the day? Real quick, I'm your host. I'm a product manager on the AKS and Cloud Native Platforms team. I've been at Microsoft for 23 years now, based out of Denver, Colorado. I live in Colorado because of the pictures you see there, doing things outside, climbing mountains and so forth. So good to be here. What is our agenda for the day? Our plan is to go through a little bit of updates around the community. Haven't done one of these in a while. And then we'll dig into some roadmap and recent announcements and take some questions. Um, go ahead and give a quick update around what the community is. This is basically the place where our customers can connect to the product team. We do that in a few different ways. We've been doing some live streams early on. Really, we're using the YouTube channel as the primary home for the community. And so we've been producing pre-recorded videos there to help people understand things in AKS, how to do things, announcements around features, all kinds of things like that. We're also adding this Azure subreddit Ask Me Anything session, which I'll talk about in more detail here in a moment. And of course, we're always available out on the YouTube and Twitter channel. There's a GitHub account as well with some of the details around the community. So always would love your feedback on things that we can do and things that we can add here. So please stay in touch. We do have a code of conduct. The full code of conduct is out on that GitHub site. Just be nice. I think that's what we're really looking for. We know that the internet isn't always a super nice place. So I think it's just helpful to be nice to people here in this kind of world. And certainly we don't have tolerance for things that violate that code of conduct. Again, I mentioned using Reddit for an Ask Me Anything session. So that actually, I posted it last night. But it is going all day today. So really starting around now through the afternoon, we'll be on that Ask Me Anything thread, answering questions. The whole team will be there, so feel free to ask anything that you're curious about. It is Ask Me Anything. And we've already seen quite a few questions there. I think there's at least a dozen questions before we really got going. So you can see the link down there to get started. This is an experiment, the first time we're trying it, so bear with us as we figure it out. But I think it's going to be a really great way to always have that opportunity each month to ask questions that'll always kind of coincide with this roadmap call as we're doing here today. So with that, let's dig right into the roadmap update. Like I mentioned at the beginning, we haven't done one of these in a while, and so there's been multiple events, multiple KubeCons, multiple events like Ignite and Build with updates. And so I decided, at least for today, to focus on those events and things that we've talked about. If you ever want to just stay connected with what's going on with the roadmap in general, just jump out to our GitHub site for AKS, and we have the full roadmap there. So you can actually see when things are going, public preview, GA, things that we're in progress working on. We've added some additional categories like GA archive. It's been GA for a while. It's still GA, but you want to be able to go to that GA view and just see the things that are more recent. We've even added things that have been deprecated. We have a long support cycle for things that we've deprecated, but at the same time, we want to be able to have a place you can go and see what those things are. And so the roadmap is out there. Again, I'm going to focus a little bit on some of the events and things that we have had recently. Back at KubeCon in Chicago last fall, we made quite a few announcements and things around previews. At the open source events, it's not always necessarily an official preview. Like, for example, the Carpenter provider, it's really just an open source project that we contribute to and ensure that the Carpenter technology can work well in AKS. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in a moment. We made a preview for AKS cost analysis that's actually already gone GA, which you'll see here on the next slide. That gives you that ability to go in and collect cost information down into the individual deployments and pods and workloads in your clusters and feed that into Azure's cost analysis. So I can not only see all of my cost information for everything I'm doing in Azure, but even all of the individual deployments that I'm running inside of the cluster. So a lot of teams want to know which teams are using resources, which namespaces, things like that. I actually can do that with AKS cost analysis. We also announced artifact streaming. This is something that I think a lot of people it was long anticipated, but that ability to actually much more efficiently stream large images to clusters. This actually could become super useful when we talk about things like LLMs. More and more companies are building custom generative AI solutions and running them on things like AKS. And these images, if we're embedding any kind of large models and so forth in them, they can be quite large. And this is one way to actually stream those a bit more efficiently and potentially get these pods started more quickly, as opposed to just waiting for a very large image to actually download. So a lot of interesting use cases for this out in preview today. Another thing around container images is image integrity. This is a preview you can take a look at today as well. This allows you to apply a digital signature to all of your container images and then validate and enforce those signatures when containers are deployed in the cluster. This is super important. I can actually say, only images that are signed by this authority can run in my cluster. It gives me much more granular control over what can actually happen in the cluster beyond just, does this image have vulnerabilities? I think most people are doing that today. I think more and more we're going to see customers looking for that extra level of security, all kinds of course, attack vectors in security that we need to be prepared for. And image integrity is one that can really address a major concern about ensuring your images are truly safe and the ones that you expect. Now, Ignite was shortly after KubeCon in Chicago. We made a few other announcements. Fleet Manager is something that had been in preview. We went GA on Fleet Manager. Very excited about that offering. We hear from customers that their fleet of clusters is growing more and more, and they need tools that can help them manage those in a collective fashion. And so AKS Fleet Manager is about that kind of thing. And we can first do things like upgrade orchestration. This allows you to actually group clusters in that fleet into particular groups, custom groups that you define, and then create an upgrade orchestration workflow across those groups. So I could say, dev happens before prod. Maybe I do some of my upgrades in parallel and some other ones in serial. And then within that workflow, I can add wait times. And I can say, okay, great, we completed staging. Let's pause this and run tests for some period of defined time, and then actually continue that upgrade through that process. All kinds of interesting things that you can do there to actually be a bit more intelligent about upgrades. I'll talk a little bit more about everything that we're doing around upgrades after we go through some of the roadmap updates here. We did GA, the app routing add-on. If you're not familiar with app routing, one of the common tasks, of course, that you need to do within a cluster is set up an ingress for applications that need to be exposed outside of the cluster. And this can be a cumbersome task. I mean, in many cases, companies will, of course, install that infrastructure, and that part may be fairly simple, but then how do dev teams actually set up their applications to actually be configured with that? And so app routing add-on actually turns that around and says, okay, let's build the ingress requirements into the application manifest, and then actually app routing will pick up on that and take care of all of the configuration for the ingress, set up any kind of SSL certs, put them in Key Vault, take care of all the DNS configuration and things for you. So super simple way to actually do ingress within the cluster. It uses Nginx today in that GA, but we will be adding other kinds of ingress options to it. Things like you can think about the Istio add-on ingress gateway, things like that we'll be adding to that kind of in the future. One of the big previews, I mentioned Carpenter. the managed Carpenter solution in AKS is called Node Auto Provision. And so that preview came out around Ignite, and companies have been testing it out and giving us feedback for ever since then. Pretty excited about what Node Auto Provision can do. It really changes the dynamic of how resources are utilized within a cluster, and hopefully allows much higher level of optimization. Effectively, instead of using node pools and the cluster autoscaler, I actually focus more on what are the application requirements that have been defined. This application has some resource requests and limits. We can find the appropriate VM just to place this workload. And I say find, it might already be in the cluster. If not, we actually go and provision that VM, deploy it as a node in the cluster, and then deploy the app to that node. And so it ends up avoiding scenarios where maybe you have a really large VM size node pool, 32 cores, large amounts of RAM, and then there's this small particular deployment that just needs minimal resources, and there's nowhere to place it in that node pool. In that case, you're going to end up provisioning a whole new, very large VM, high cost VM, and then placing this tiny little pod on that VM. And that's obviously not very efficient. And so in that case, Node Auto Provision using Carpenter will actually provision a more appropriate VM. And you have the ability to configure and control which VMs are used, VM families and sizes and so forth. There's quite a bit of configuration to it, but hopefully leading to a much more optimal environment as you're deploying things. So definitely take a look at that preview. We're hoping to GA this soon. We just really want to make sure customers give us all the feedback and make sure it works as expected. You probably saw announcements around Copilot, certainly from Microsoft. There's a lot of different Copilots and AI solutions. It's all the news everywhere, right? Chat GPT and so forth. So we decided let's make sure we bring that technology to Azure and really focus on how can it help you with AKS administration and deployments. It's particularly useful for anyone that's new to the platform, but frankly, even if you've worked with it for a long time like me, there's always commands and things that you need to do that you may not have done before. And instead of maybe rooting through docs, I can ask simple questions like, what's the Prometheus query for seeing individual CPU and memory utilization for particular deployments, whatever it might be. It's probably not a great example, but I can actually get back those kinds of things. Or how do I troubleshoot a crash loop backoff? Should be something that people have seen in Kubernetes, but if not, that Copilot will actually guide people through that and guide them through what the commands are, how to use them, and everything. And it can be general questions about documentation or actually interactive things that I'm doing within the cluster right then. So we continue to add more and more intelligence to that Copilot, particularly for AKS. It's obviously an Azure-wide solution, but we're actually spending quite a bit of time making that powerful within AKS. You may have heard about Kaito, which is Kubernetes AI toolchain operator. Obviously, with all the usage of generative AI, some companies are wanting to build solutions based off of custom open source models that off the internet. They can grab Llama, things like Mistral, and they want to run them within a Kubernetes environment. And so the Kubernetes AI toolchain operator basically makes that super simple for you to actually just configure, here's what I actually need for this AI solution. And then it'll actually go configure the model, pull down that model, set up inferencing, deploy GPUs and VMs. It actually uses Node Auto Provision to provision the appropriate resources on demand. It takes care of all of the heavy lifting that would go through running this kind of solution in your AKS cluster. We're in the early stages of this, but as you'll see, we're going to continue to add more and more to it to make it simple to actually run these kind of AI solutions on top of Kubernetes and allow you to actually choose what you want. We obviously have Azure's OpenAI service as a hosted model within the cluster, but this gives people that flexibility to do whatever they want as well. We also announced confidential containers, which brings the Kata technology to allow actual isolation, sort of hypervisor level isolation within each container. And there's certainly workloads that we want that level of isolation beyond just the simple container pod paradigm. And so this is what will help those customers that have those kinds of workloads be able to do that. So CAD has actually been around quite some time, and we've had confidential compute in AKS for a while. This takes this to the container level and allows for much more kind of simple isolation of those kinds of workloads. So I'll jump ahead to KubeCon in Europe, which was in Paris only at this point a few months ago. A few things to highlight here. AKS cost analysis that I talked about went GA at that time. We announced support for 5,000 node clusters in the standard tier. In Windows AKS, Gen 2 VM support was something that a lot of customers have been waiting for. Some previews that we announced, in some cases, they're not like Azure previews, but they're just kind of open source solutions like Microsoft Retina. This is a tool that actually exposes eBPF metrics and details of your environment. And so it makes it really easy for customers to actually get a much more depth level network view of what's going on in the environment. We incorporated this into our network observability add-on, and that's a way a lot of customers would actually spend time with this tool. But it is an open source tool. Since we use it there, we thought we'd make it available to customers, and who knows what else you can use it for. So definitely take a look at Retina as an open source project. We also announced deployment safeguards. This is something that we'd love to have you take a look at today as a preview. Effectively, what this is as teams get started with AKS, we find that the developer teams and admins don't always know all of the best practices, and so they start deploying workloads that are missing things like PDBs or health checks or whatever that may be. And so deployment safeguards can be turned on to actually protect the environment from that. Uh, you can do things like Azure Policy, of course, that's available. This is effectively collects all the common sort of policies that are typically in place for best practices around AKS and Kubernetes, and can turn them on in both a warning mode and an enforce mode. So it can not only just warn people, hey, you're deploying this, you need to make sure you add X, Y, and Z, and here's how to do it. But we can actually block workloads or even potentially fix the update that needed to occur. If it's a simple enough update, we can actually modify it on the fly and still allow it in via an admission controller. And so deployment safeguards is there to actually kind of teach people along the way the proper way to do things. And you could think of it as a set of guardrails. I can run with guardrails. I can also turn them off and allow people to do whatever they need. And so a great way to actually teach best practices and make it much easier for teams to adopt AKS for their applications. We also announced Fleet Intelligent Workload Scheduling. This is something that Fleet can actually take care of deployments of applications across your entire fleet of AKS. So instead of actually just deploying workloads and you choosing which particular cluster or set of clusters where workloads should be deployed, we actually deploy things to Fleet and let Fleet actually take in information about cost, usage detail across the environment, and actually place them in a much more optimal way. Fleet, we're in preview on this today, but I think it's a great chance to actually see, okay, maybe we can change things a little bit, and instead of just having a series of clusters and managing them one-to-one with our applications, let's actually treat the entire environment collectively, and just instead of deploying individually, deploy them to that fleet and let it actually be intelligent about how it gets deployed. Super excited about what those capabilities are. Definitely try those out and let us know what you think. Some recent updates that have either recently happened or are coming. By the way, Build is a good time to mention Build. If this session were, say, next month, this would be, here's what it was announced at Build 2024. So we'll look for that at the next roadmap call. But version 1.30, we expect that this month. And so will certainly be updates that you can try that out. Istio add-on, made a few updates to the Istio add-on. A lot of customers have asked, how do we make special custom configurations in mesh config and proxy config? So you'll see that we've exposed those updates via the add-on, and the docs actually are very clear about which things can be updated and which things perhaps are unsupported. A lot of companies want to use their own CA. Certainly, the default is just using a self-signed certificate as the root CA in your Istio deployment. This gives you the ability to actually plug in something from a specific certificate authority PKI environment in your infrastructure. And so this is something most teams, as they go into a real production enterprise deployment, want to be able to ensure things are truly signed and secure in an appropriate way. And we give that ability to do canary upgrades. This is you have this Istio control plane, and I want to be able to make sure it's up to date, but I want to do it in a controlled fashion. And I want to maybe deploy a particular version of that Istio add-on. I can end up having both versions of the control plane in my cluster at the same time, and then slowly convert each of the individual namespaces and projects in the environment so that all the sidecars can be handled separately from the control plane, and then I can cut over to the actual new version of that control Istio control plane. Makes it super simple to keep Istio up to date, but also do it in a fashion that allows me to actually see what happens with those particular upgrades and ensure it doesn't have any impact to the environment. Control plane metrics being available in our managed Prometheus solution. This is something that customers have been asking about for quite some time. Since AKS is a managed control plane, the metrics are obviously really initiated on our side. And so making those available to customers is super important. If you have an SLA-based cluster, we're looking at those metrics too. We have scaling and SREs and things that are monitoring those clusters, but at the same time, many customers want to see, what's the impact? I added a new set of tools in my cluster with daemon sets. Did that actually cause any kind of issues with the control plane? It's certainly great for troubleshooting that kind of thing as that might appear. API server vNet integration. A lot of teams have been anticipating this for quite some time. As I mentioned, we won't really provide dates here on when things are being released, but we're getting very close on this one. We do rely on a lot of deep level networking features within the Azure Fabric, and so this is taking some time, but certainly we're getting close. There's a lot of companies that this is absolutely imperative for them to deploy certain kind of secure workloads, and so we're almost there. The service connector was announced as a preview. This is something that's a part of Azure that we've integrated with AKS. The basic idea is that when you're deploying applications and workloads, in many cases, they're connecting to other Azure services, Azure SQL, Azure Storage, Azure OpenAI. And instead of actually asking the user to set up workload identity, store credentials and key vault, configure the connection and make sure it's available from the application to be able to reach that service. Service connector actually takes care of all of that for you. So you just specify all of that in that deployment, and everything will actually be wired up and done for the user in a secure way. Definitely a great way, especially as teams are building applications. Again, we talk about teams that are new and there maybe isn't a process to doing this in a more manual way. This actually can really set up everything really quickly for everybody, teach the appropriate way to do it, and really automate things so that those tasks aren't left up to folks to deliver. Disable SSH. This is a common request. We've added a preview to give you that ability to do that. And network isolated clusters is something that isn't a preview today, but we're working on it. At one point, we called this kind of air-gapped AKS. But certainly some customers say that they have a requirement that maybe a particular workload can have no internet access. And the cluster actually does need to reach out to, say, Microsoft Container Registry to pull all of the core images that run AKS. And even though that really is still Microsoft, it's considered an internet connection. And so what we end up doing with the network isolated cluster is you use your own private Azure Container Registry that stays in that private vNet. And we cache all of those images there as needed. So it still allows the cluster to be deployed, kept up to date with all the latest updates, while still having no actual outbound internet access. So look for that soon. That's something that we're working on. Again, you'll see that out in that roadmap over on GitHub. Now that's all of the announcements. As I was going through some of those announcements, a couple of different things came up around keeping clusters up to date and AKS upgrades. And so what we commonly hear from customers, probably the most common scenario that can be a struggle, is keeping their clusters up to date. And so I wanted to kind of talk through a little bit about all the things that have been done here, because some things were a part of recent announcements, but a lot of things have been there quite a bit longer. But when customers bring up issues around upgrades, there's kind of three core things that are a part of that. One is, how do I just stay within the supported version? Some companies, this is no problem. They have an automated environment. They take care of all of those upgrades in an automated fashion. But some companies, this is a massive burden, and staying supported is actually difficult, and they often are out of support and struggling to keep up. The second thing is, even if they actually can keep up, what if these upgrades are actually failing, or there's issues with particular nodes, things that actually block those upgrades and so forth. So they end up not being successful, even though they've automated things. And the third big area, and probably in my opinion the most important, is I, I don't want to have any disruption to my workloads. I need to make sure that workloads are always available, regardless of the fact that we're upgrading VMs, we're upgrading the control plane, and so forth. And so things that we've done here to actually address those kinds of things, that the automated upgrade framework in general allows you to go in and say, I want to turn on automated upgrades for the control plane and the operating system, and I can subscribe to particular channels if I just want the stable updates, or if I want to try anything that's more aggressive schedule and so forth. There's a security patch channel for the OS upgrades that's recently GA that allows you to control just how you handle security updates to your nodes. LTS was announced last year, long-term support. This is that ability to stay on a particular release for a 2-year period, even though in that 2-year period, it'll actually go out of community support from Kubernetes. And this is a really important thing for customers that do want to be here and stay on that and not actually try to constantly keep updated. We actually ensure that patches, as they come out in that unsupported time period, that we still actually go test those patches, apply them to these LTS clusters, and take care of those upgrades for you. Now, a lot of companies have adopted this. Also, a lot of companies, we'd rather them take a look at this overall framework for upgrades and try to actually keep up to date. That's actually what we'd prefer, but certainly we have that LTS support for the companies that need it. As far as keeping upgrade success rate high, that ability to actually go in and validate things, validate PDBs, do a dry run around upgrades. We're working on more and more here to actually validate things before they run. We do this breaking change detection before an upgrade even is attempted. And so like if you're using particular Kubernetes APIs and 1.30 deprecates those, we'll actually check that and stop that upgrade. And so we can make sure that no kind of issues like that occur. I mentioned upgrade groups. I'll show you a little example of this, but that ability to actually orchestrate things can allow us to test releases a little bit more throughout my environment. Customers can say, these clusters, we'll call them the canary group, and we'll run an upgrade there. And if we have an impact there, it'll lessen the overall issues if there's any kind of upgrade problems that occur. Things like soak time, that time to actually validate that an upgrade truly didn't cause a problem. We typically will just test if pods come back into a running state before we move on and consider those things, those nodes upgraded. Upgrade groups allows me to actually take some time and let's just see, maybe when traffic increases later in the day, we can ensure that these upgrades are actually truly successfully working beyond just the status of Kubernetes running. And we do provide our release tracker. You can actually go see specific release notes on our GitHub. We actually put a lot of time into these specific release notes, ensuring that you have everything that you need to know what's in a release and an update. And we're making more and more of that detail available via API so that when you are building kind of automations around upgrades, you have that ability to actually get all of that information even programmatically. As far as workload disruption, Some of this is around best practices, having proper PDBs in place, health checks that truly validate if an application is ready for traffic and so forth. You have this concept of planned maintenance windows that you can set. That's a big part of really solving things. A lot of companies, there's certain times that they can really sustain any kind of issues if an upgrade caused a disruption. And so those maintenance windows can at least control when these things occur and help quite a bit in that. We're working on things like upgrade rollback or essentially a reset. If there's any kind of issues within an upgrade, a lot of companies just want to say, I want to go back. I'm going to have to troubleshoot this. We thought we were safe. We're working on that as well. We're working on workload metrics-based upgrades. And this kind of fits into the example I'm describing of, sure, the application comes on and it's running. The pod is functional, but as it turns out, for some reason, maybe the upgrade caused a CPU spike. And we can actually validate for particular thresholds around a workload as it's deployed and ensure that it meets whatever thresholds you need. That way you can ensure that, hey, before we move on to the next node in this upgrade process, let's make sure that we aren't already causing any kind of performance-based issues as we did that upgrade. So very excited about some of those things that are coming. And again, our goal here is to actually help you keep AKS up to date and almost have it be something you don't really think about, that these upgrades are automated, they happen in the background, and you're generally protected around the workloads that you're running in the environment. And that's our goal, to make this a seamless operation. And so this is a lot of the things that we've done to address that. And again, we're continuing to focus on this because we know customers care about it quite a bit. So that is all I had for updates around the roadmap and recent announcements. I do want to bring up, obviously, we're right here on the YouTube channel, so you're aware of where all of this content is. Some of the things that we recently started adding to the YouTube channel, we have these Azure Day events that we do at each of the KubeCons in Europe and North America. And so we've put all the videos of those days out on YouTube. And so if you weren't able to come to KubeCon in Paris and see the Azure Day before the event, you can actually watch the entire thing right on YouTube. Things like the AI-driven cost optimization session, which covered cost analysis, node auto provision, spot and reserved instances, all kinds of great solutions for managing cost. That video is there. These are long videos because they're full sessions at the event. But tons of great information in there. Some announcements, lots of really good demos. We have our partners that are a part of the AKS marketplace there as well. You can watch the keynote George Palmo delivered at that session, and again, see kind of a summary of all those kinds of announcements, some of which I talked about here today. So we're looking to add more and more to the YouTube channel. We've got some shorter videos that just kind of do a quick update around how to use new technology and things that are available in the platform. We'll probably release some series of videos like, the Istio add-on. Let's talk end to end. What is it? All the way down to how you manage performance and so forth. And so we've got some videos like that coming, but we'd love to hear about videos that you'd love to see. So certainly let us know. Stay in touch via this YouTube channel, out on the Twitter account, and so forth. And again, over on the Azure subreddit, you'll be able to join in on the Ask Me Anything here today, throughout the rest of the day, and again each month going forward. So thanks everybody for joining. It's been really great to kind of kick these off again. So we'll look forward to doing these each month. Same kind of time frame. I think it's the second Thursday each month. So we will see you there. Thanks again for joining.